Hello and welcome to Speaking Spirit, where we talk about all things spiritual. Your host, John Moore, is a shamanic practitioner and spiritual teacher. And now, here's John.
Hello, everybody. I hope you are well. I hope you're keeping safe and well, and I welcome you. I love each and every one of you. I realize that may sound weird, and I stole this from a meme somewhere on Facebook or something, but the meme said something along the lines of, you know, if other people can hate one another without knowing each other, then I certainly can love people I have never met, or love you without fully knowing you. And why not, right? Love wins. Love is better than hate. We have a weird relationship with the word love in English because it's very broad and generic. We use it for a lot of things, and I know in other languages there are multiple words that we would use the word love for in English. So I can love a cheeseburger, and I can love my children, and I can love my girlfriend, and I can love my country. And they're all different things, right? Hopefully I don't love my children the same way I love a cheeseburger or a vanilla milkshake, right? And so there are different kinds of love, and we add modifiers: family love, familial love, same thing, romantic love. It's a weird one, romantic love. Not that I'm not a romantic, but yeah, it's just we have some weird concepts about it. But I'm already going off on a tangent because that's not. I'm not talking about love today, but I do love you, and I hope that comes through. And that is the reason why I do these. And part of it is ego, for sure. I have things I want to say and get out into the world, and this is one way that I can do that. So I recognize that. I have an ego. We all do. No matter how far along in my spiritual path I get, I am not going to be, bold enough to say I don't have an ego anymore. That would be braggy and not true. And, I might be deluding myself and go down a really bad pathway. So today, and this, so this podcast, this will be episode 28. I don't usually talk about the episode numbers too much, but this will be my 28th podcast. Thank you if you are a long-term subscriber, or a first-time listener. It doesn't matter much. But so in the previous episode 27, I talked about setting up altars, setting up personal altars, and why that was important, how you could do it, what might go on your altar, what not to go on your altar. So if you haven't listened to that one, you don't have to listen to it before this one. None of my podcasts work that way. You can jump in anywhere you like, listen to any topic you're interested in. But during that podcast, I mentioned that altars are a great place to make and leave offerings. So, and I also promised that I was going to do a podcast about offerings. And so that's what this is. I'm trying to keep my promises. So I'm going to, I'll talk about offerings, and I'm also going to talk about the idea of exchange, of spiritual exchange. And I'm going to talk about the evil, bad, nasty, mean topic of money. And, how that works and what place it plays in today's spirituality. I hear lots of weird, weird is a judgment call, but it is my judgment that they're weird ideas, because they don't, weird from my perspective, because they don't make much sense at all. So we'll talk about exchange and why exchange is actually an important thing. So, we have people who serve in positions of, I don't know, religious or spiritual authority, or we have spiritual teachers or gurus or clergy or what have you. And we have spiritual professionals, right? Clergy is a type of spiritual professional, but we also have spiritual healers and spiritual teachers. So we'll talk about that as well. And why do they ask for money, and is it okay? Is it okay to charge for spiritual services? Spoiler alert, my opinion is yes, it is, and I do. And I'll tell you why, and I'll explain it, because that's a topic that some people, not a lot, but some people have a challenge with. I've been challenged over that myself. I think I have some good answers, or I have answers that satisfy me and seem to satisfy some other people. Some people, when they have an opinion about something, never change that and cannot be convinced with logic or good reasoning. We see that in almost every place today. So we will talk about that. So I'm gonna talk about offerings, and I'm gonna talk about it from several different angles, but specifically offerings to spirit. Now, I know that I have participated in Christian church services, and there is something called an offering plate that usually gets passed around in the church. I realize nowadays sometimes people donate in other ways to their church. I don't know, maybe they use Apple Pay these days. I haven't been in a church in a really long time, but when I was a boy, the collection plate was the way that one of the major ways that churches received the money that they needed to operate. So they had to pay the minister or the clergy, they had to pay the expenses for the building, all of those things. And so the church members would be asked to donate, and they would do that out of the goodness of their heart and the fact that they wanted to support their church. And people donated in other ways too, just, gave large donations to churches or what have you. And I also know that in the history of the Christian church, there were places where the church was the tax collector. So, they went around and actually forcibly collected taxes from people, and that's how they stayed afloat. There were churches that were engaged in commerce, right? There were church organizations that brewed beer and raised crops. There were churches that owned land during the feudal, that owned land during feudal period and had tenant farmers working the land, and they took the goods that the tenant farmers grew and worked out that way. So, yeah, offerings maybe a newer invention of these things, but these religious institutions, and I'm not arguing good or bad, had to be funded in some way, and we could argue all day and all night about how much funding they need and whether they should be taxed or tax-free or what have you, whatever. But I think we could agree anyway that if any organization wants to have a building that they maintain somewhere these days, that is normally going to be done, require financial means. It's going to require money to maintain a building, let alone all of the other things, printing programs and buying Bibles and what have you. Churches can be very large organizations, and there can be very large organizations that support churches. So I'm not particularly talking about that type of offering today, although certainly people, when they make offerings, may be offering up to God their money, and that is, in my opinion, a legitimate thing. Even though the money is going to the church, they have a psycho-spiritual effect from the intention behind the offering. Now, intention is going to be really important, and I'm going to talk about that a lot today. So they are making an offering. Another word that goes along with offering is sacrifice, right? And, we have, sacrifice in the old school was sacrificing animals or people or, what have you. But, we use it as a giving up of something, is a giving up something of value to you. I might sacrifice my time to do this podcast. My time is extremely valuable. I am a very busy person with clients and family and writing and everything else that I do. Sacrificing my time, giving it over, is giving something I value over for me for a spiritual purpose, to spirit. And so there's that aspect as well, right? There's the aspect of that I am giving up something that is of some importance to me, and I hold an intention that this is to promote the spirits that I support, the God that I support, the religion that I support, what have you. Okay. So there's a couple, there's the, when we talk about offerings and making offerings, there are two components of it. There's the intention. There's the third component, which is the actual physical thing that you're making an offer to. There's the intent. What's my intention behind the offering? In shamanism, which is the path, the spiritual path that I follow, intention is just about everything. When I work, when I'm doing a healing or I'm leading a class or whatever, if I do not have a good, solid intention when I work, things are not going to go really well. They're not going to go smoothly. They're not going to work out or become clear. So intention is everything. There's another topic for a podcast. And I've actually done work in with martial arts as well. I've taught martial arts for a couple of decades anyway, and I train people how to use intent in martial art, which is, intention is another word for intention. I train people how to use intention to focus their power. I could physically demonstrate the effect of intention with people. Hard to do that over an audio podcast only, but I can assure you there are ways of demonstrating that physically, where, I can take students through different exercises and, one where they have no intention, one where they have intention, and it amplifies the effect of whatever they're doing. So intention is key. And then there is the concept of sacrifice. I'm giving something up, giving something over that has, some value to me. And it doesn't always have to be like, and probably shouldn't be, if you are sacrificing so much that you can't live your life in a good manner. So, let's say I donate so much money to some spiritual foundation or something that I can't pay my electricity bill this month, and I have no electricity and I have no lights, and, my kids can't do their homework, or, any of those things. That's probably not a good idea. That's probably not a good level of sacrifice. So there are levels of sacrifice that go into making an offering. So let me talk, I'll talk a little bit about the spiritual component of making offerings and sort of what happens. And again, this is from my perspective because there are probably as many ways of making offerings as there are people who make offerings, right? There's probably, hundreds of thousands, millions of different ways to make offerings. So I'm trying to break it down for you component wise. And there are different traditions as well. And clearly, if you are working within a tradition, if you are a Northern European pagan heathen, then you would make certain types of offerings on certain types of days and certain types of ways. And if you were, Wiccan, you would do it a different way, and that sort of thing. So, I want to break it down into sort of simple concepts, and you can apply it. And I hope you do. I try to be somewhat practical with these podcasts, so you can take something that I have that you've learned from here and do something with it that is useful to you. And so I'm not prescribing anything. I'm not telling you what you should or shouldn't do, but just giving you some things to think about that you can try out. And if they work for you, they work for you. And if not, you can discard them and go, that guy didn't know what he was talking about. And that's fine too. So I want to talk about sort of the spiritual aspect of making offerings. And so from that perspective, I will talk about the ways that I make offerings. And again, they may differ from the way you do it or anybody else or everybody else does it. But I have to have a reference point. I have to have a place to start so I can talk about this stuff. And I am not an expert in the way you do things. I am, somewhat of an expert in the way I do things because I've been doing what I do the way I do it for as long as I've done it. So how's that? So let's say that I am going to, I make all kinds of offerings, and I offer different things depending upon the work that I'm doing. So, for example, when I am teaching a class, I will have an altarpiece with a bowl of flowers in it, and we will, over the course of the class, the altarpiece becomes a focus of attention and the center and all of these things. And so the idea is that these flowers, this bowl of flowers becomes imbued with the spiritual energy that is flowing in the room. And I believe that is I believe that is true. Like, I believe that the things that we place in the altar become imbued with spiritual energy and with the good vibrations and the good thoughts and feelings that come up when we're training. And so then when I am done with the class, when the class is over, if it's a 2-day class, we'll say, after 2 days, I don't take those flowers and dump them in the garbage. I take them out into nature somewhere, depends on where I'm teaching, and offer them to the spirits that are there. Now, if that is if the place where I am teaching is close to a spot where I might make an offering, I will do it there and thank the spirits of place. So in my experience, there are always spirits of place around, and having a good relationship with them is a really good idea. You are sharing space with them. They live there as much as you do, and you can imagine if hey, I'm gonna borrow your house for a couple of days. It might make things smooth, and you might be happier if I brought you a gift. That would be good etiquette, right? I think in most cultures, if I come stay with you, I might bring you gifts. So, I'll offer that up to the to the spirits of place. And so these flowers, they're physical objects. And so I think, most of the time when I am making offerings, it is, not always, most of the time it is something physical. Very frequently it is either flowers, it could be incense, it could be sustenance, food, water, honey, wine, typical things that I might offer because of the work that I do, and because of the, I try to be sensitive to the spirits that I'm making an offering to. And, we know from tradition that certain things are more traditional offerings. And I know from interacting with spirit, which is what shamans do, and I do it, in my role as a shamanic practitioner. There are things like I have a relationship with spirits and they tell me what they want. I'll ask them, what should I leave for you? The other thing that I will frequently do is, and so that's about leaving offerings at a place in nature, particularly to the spirits of place. I will often do that as well if I go on a hike to some place. If I've never, I'll do it if I've never been there before, for sure. But also places that I go to regularly and have a good, I try to keep a good relationship with the spirits of nature. I don't hike with a bowl of flowers, but I might bring some cornmeal with me to offer to the the spirits of place. So again, there's sacrifice. So there's intention. So when I put these offerings out, I may say a few words, or I may just, mentally have the thought, these are for you. Please, please take sustenance. I thank you, and please take sustenance from these. So there's a sustenance level, and you may be wondering, how do spirits take sustenance from physical things? And if you are wondering that, that is a very good question. Do spirits need to eat and drink? Well, I don't know that they need to. They do seem to enjoy the things that I offer. Does seem to help keep a good relationship with them. But there is a level of sustenance. And the reason for that is, in my model of the multiverse and the way that reality works, is that everything that has a spiritual or has a physical component, everything is a spirit. Everything has a spiritual component to it, or multiple spiritual components to it. So in front of me, I know you can't see this, so I'm going to describe it to you. I am holding up a jar of tomato salsa from a local artisan. So yes, this jar of salsa I can hold in my hands. It has physical reality. It has physical matter. But there is a spiritual component to that. In shamanism, we would call that, like it would have a presence in the middle world. If I were doing a shamanic journey, I would be able to see this jar, still be able to see this jar of salsa. Because there's a spiritual component. And there are, probably close to, if not infinite, layers of spiritual reality where things get more and less solid as they move along. So these spiritual beings who are, I describe them as spiritual because we are spiritual beings, but in this case, I'm referring to spirits as non-physical, meaning they don't have a presence on the plane of matter. They don't have a material presence. But they might live very, very close. They might live on a layer. If you think about like pages of a book, and page 37 is the physical realm, and page 38, which touches that, is another layer, and 39, which is on the other side of 38, is close but not quite touching. So a lot of spirits, a lot of nature spirits live on that plane that's touching ours, which is why people who are really sensitive can sometimes see them. They can sometimes have an effect, very frequently have an effect on the physical world. If you want your plants to thrive, it's a good idea to appease the spirits of nature. They will tend to your plants. Not tend to them in the way that they'll water them for you, but they will tend to the life force of these things in the area. And, our ancient ancestors knew this stuff. They worked with this stuff. They would have starved to death if they weren't in touch with the spirits of nature, right? Because human beings we're not particularly fast or strong compared to other predators. We don't have very sharp teeth or claws, all of these things. So the things that helped us survive were our ability to gather into tribes, to make tools, to, but also to invent spirituality, which happened very early on in human development, way before the advent of any kind of what we would consider civilization. We see cave paintings tens of thousands of years old with religious is kind of a weird word. I'll say spiritual symbolism. Religious from the aspect of they were practicing a specific form of spirituality. It wasn't just a belief. It was practice. But not religion in the way that we think of organized religion. And it was very survival oriented. Like you had to, maybe pray to the spirits to help you find the animals that you hunted to depend on. That you had to eat, and your tribe had to eat, and so maybe there was some things going on there, and that seems to be the case in a lot of these cave paintings. There are hunting scenes and scenes of religious activity or spiritual activity. So spirits can take sustenance in the form of energy from these offerings, and different things, different material things, kind of have different levels of vibration, and so what you offer does make a difference, right? I'm not going to leave a plastic Tupperware container out for the spirits because plastic is a really odd vibration that spirits of place probably are pretty unfamiliar with, right? It's like if you were to try some kind of food that you're not even sure it's food kind of thing, you're a little hesitant about, might cause some anxiety. I'm not trying to really anthropomorphize spirits that much, but it's really the only way I can describe how this works. Okay. So the other thing that affects the vibration, for lack of a better term, or the energy of the thing that you're offering is intention. And you can imbue the thing you're offering with intention. If you go with gratitude, it transmits the energy of your gratitude to the spirits that take sustenance from the offering. So it's a good idea to consider anything you're offering, the material form of things you're offering, as well as the intention behind it, and as well as whatever energy that the thing carries with it. So again, when we had the bowl of flowers in our class, and I take the flowers out that hopefully have all this great energy, the spirits of place, the nature spirits, they all seem to really like that. So where I live in North America, another traditional offering might be cornmeal, right? In the spirits of place, it's something they're familiar with. Tobacco is another one. Okay, so that is the sort of what I'm offering, and a little bit of how I'm offering. I might offer it with a little prayer or just a little thought, a little silent prayer. Please take sustenance from this. I thank you for sharing your space with me. Is simple enough. If there are, obviously if there are gods and goddesses in your spiritual system or a god or what have you, again, stick with those traditions because that's what people traditionally do. Another form of offering that I somewhat frequently make, a little less than just placing things out on an altar or placing things in nature. But you can use the elements of earth, air, fire, and water to make different kinds of offerings. And so you can make offerings to a fire. Obviously, you want those things to be non-toxic and consumable by fire and non-polluting. But I might, when I've done fire ceremony or I've participated in fire ceremony, some of the things that we offer to the fire, particularly in North America or the Americas anyway, some of these things aren't from North America, but, tobacco and chocolate are traditional, cornmeal, things like that. And, so you can, fire is obviously a very active spirit, and fire can also carry prayers, transmute prayers really quickly. Fire is rapidly moving. And so, one of the ways that I might make an offering is to make a prayer. Let's say I take a handful of cornmeal, I'll hold it against my heart. I will make a prayer in my mind. Then I'll hold the cornmeal up to my mouth and I will blow, intending to blow the prayer into the cornmeal, and then I will cast it into the fire. And that will, take the energy of the intention and the prayer and the offering, and the fire, especially with cornmeal, transmutes that very quickly, burns it up really quickly, goes through the material, sort of removing the material component of the energy. Incense is also a way that takes advantage of fire and air elements, because you can use incense as an offering for sure for lots of spirits. I probably would not burn frankincense on the altar to the nature spirits in my area, because frankincense doesn't come from here. And I don't know if that is something they would find enjoyable. But I might burn frankincense to, on an altar dedicated to Hecate, or, to other spirits, other work that I was doing. I might offer frankincense out to them. But so I live, I live in the state of Maine, in the northeast part of the United States. And we are known for pine trees. Maine's called the pine tree state, as a matter of fact. Tons, lots and lots and lots and lots of pine trees everywhere. So, I might find, if I were going to offer incense to, scented smoke in some way to nature spirits, first of all, I'd be really careful not to start a forest fire. That would not be something that would put me in good graces with the spirits. But I might offer something like balsam fir, right, which has a strong pine scent to it and grows in the area. And again, I would use prayer and intention. It would be somewhat of a sacrifice. I'm giving up something that I like. I like balsam fir. Not a huge sacrifice, but it's still giving something over to carry those prayers over to the spirits of place. So there are all different kinds of ways that you can make offerings. Some, you can leave food out. You can, you just want to be conscientious. Wow, I'm having a hard time saying that this morning. conscious. We'll say conscious. You want to be conscious of what you're leaving out and where. You don't want to pollute your environment. You don't want, if you use food on an internal altar, an altar inside your home or space, you want to dispose of that food, before it rots and creates a health hazard. But the way you dispose of that food might be important as well. Do you want to just throw the food in the garbage? Sometimes that's the only option, and that's okay. You just want to, if you do that, it's a good idea to make a little prayer or have an intention that, okay, I hope you have received this offering and taken sustenance from it. It is no longer an offering, and I need to remove it from this space. So when I have sometimes had food on an altar inside the house, I'm conscious of how long that food stays good. So let's say, a hard-boiled egg is something that I have made an offering of on an altar before. I know that is only going to be good for 2 or 3 days. So really on the third day, I'm looking to dispose of that. And what I will do is I will bring that out because I can. And if you can't, that's completely understandable. You just do something intentional. I bring it out in nature and place it and have a little prayer when I place it. Thank you. I hope you've taken sustenance from this, and I'm now removing this offering from the space, and I will leave it in nature. Continue to enjoy it as you will. Doesn't have to be anything overly complicated. I know there are there's ceremonies for blessing offerings. I encourage that as well. Again, that imbues energy and intention into the offering. Cleansing offerings. Sometimes offerings are cleansed in the smoke of incense or with water or what have you. Those can be good things to do as well to make sure that the energy is sort of pure and vibrationally nice for the spirits that you're making offerings to. So I've sort of talked about the how and the practical in really general terms and how I do it. And again, if your tradition is different, that's perfectly fine. I have no qualms with that whatsoever. And I've talked about the components of offerings, the physical component, the intention, and the idea of sacrifice, and also the energy, the vibration, the imbuing of the offering with spiritual energy to provide sustenance for the spirits that you're offering to. I want to talk about why you might make offerings. And I've touched on some of it, right? I've touched on, making offerings to the spirits of place. That's a really loose term, spirits of place, because there are lots of different places. Nature spirits, are one form of spirit that exists in certain places, but I'm talking about spirits that are tied to specific locations. And even if I'm not, I live in a house and there are spirits that reside here with me. I know this because I have seen and communicated with them, as have other people. I'm not just imagining things. These are not necessarily what one might consider ghosts, but in the ancient Greek belief, it is what might be called a daemon, which is where we get the word demon from. These are not demons. They're not evil fallen angels or anything like that. They're just spirits that reside in the house, because who knows? Somebody built a house here however many years ago, and spirits came along with the wood that went into the house, and there were spirits that lived on the land that were displaced by the building of the house, and all of these things. But they're little people, like fairies, like elves and gnomes. And I did a podcast previously. I don't remember which number it was at this point, but I did one on nature spirits before, which I recommend if you have any questions about that sort of thing. So there are these spirits that live in the house. Not just ghosts. People talk about hauntings. I think usually when we're talking about hauntings, we're talking about disembodied humans. We're talking about humans who have passed away that got stuck in the middle world somehow. And I've worked a number of hauntings, we'll put it that way, as a shamanic practitioner to help these spirits move from their place, move to from where they are stuck to where they're supposed to be. I'm taking it. If you hear something weird, I'm taking a sip of coffee right about now. Very good. Love coffee. So if I were somewhere where coffee was grown, I might make coffee sacrifices, or sacrifices to the area where coffee, the spirits that live in the area where coffee grows to help with the crop. I don't know if there is I don't know if there's any traditions where there are specific gods and goddesses associated with coffee, but I drink enough, I should set up an altar. We're very big on our coffee here in the northeast of the United States. I think it's because it's cold a lot of the year, and a lot of the year we spend a lot of time in darkness. So we want a little bit of caffeine to help us wake up, and warm beverages. Although iced coffee does really well too. So anyway, coffee is super, super big here. And there are coffee shops everywhere. Coffee shops and microbreweries, coffee and beer are really big everywhere. So so why might we want to make offerings? I've touched on a couple of reasons why. One, traditional reason is to sort of curry favor with spirits. And that is just to get in the good graces of the spirits that you're working with. The spirits you might pray to, the spirits you might ask things of. And this isn't necessarily a pure exchange thing. Like if I want to pray to Zeus to avoid thunder on my home, it's going to cost me 3 cows and 6 chickens. Maybe. I'm sure there are systems where that is a thing. But if I want to, pray to Thor or pray to Zeus to protect my home from lightning, I might make offerings over time on a regular basis or something, just to establish a good relationship with them. Okay, and so offerings are frequently about establishing good relationships. Now, I talked about hauntings a little bit, right? And if you don't have experience with, let's say you live in a place that is haunted by spirits, and you don't have a lot of experience with quelling ghosts or helping disembodied disembodied spirits move on. I definitely need more coffee today. I'm getting a little bit tongue-tied sometimes or pronouncing things incorrectly. If you don't have experience with helping things move on, sometimes you can leave offerings to the spirits and they will quiet down because you start to have a relationship with them. They're not just they're like, they all have different personalities, but they can be like, oh, you've seen me, I'm here. I don't need to cause trouble anymore. And gosh, thank you. So that's one reason to leave offerings. You can call in a shamanic practitioner to do some psychopomp work, which psychopomp is currying spirits to where they're supposed to go. And that's work that all shamanic practitioners should have training in at some point, should have training and experience with at some point. So that's definitely something that you can, do, make offerings for. I would make offerings if you are working with a particular pantheon of gods and goddesses or spirits or, what have you, over time. I would definitely make offerings. It will just smooth things it helps to build a relationship. And shamanism in particular is all about relationship. It's about how we relate to spirit, how we relate to nature, how we relate to other human beings. And so this is a way to maintain a good relationship. It's like, I often find little gifts for my girlfriend when I'm out and about, and I see something that, reminds me of her, or I'm like, oh, I bet she'd be interested in that. And it's not necessarily something I go overboard with. I'm not a wealthy man. I'm not buying her cars and houses and stuff, but it's stuff that I'm demonstrating that I'm thinking of her. Right. Little gifts. And the gifts can be time and prayer as well. Right. Those things are also important. Sacrificing your time in service of spirit is also a good thing. You want to make spirits of place really happy? Go pick up garbage on the side of the road. Clean up a space. Maintain a space. Help animals that have been rescued in the area. Okay? You can give up your time. It doesn't have to be something that you've purchased at a store or what have you. But do it with intention. Do it with love. Do it with gratitude. And intention's important too, because you have to maintain the correct emotion. The spiritual plane is very close to our emotional body in this way, in that, if I do an offering, let's say I'm putting some fruit outside, and I would do local fruit if I'm not going to put a pineapple outside that doesn't grow anywhere near here. But let's say an apple. Say I'm going to offer an apple to, on an altar outside, or leave it in nature, or what have you. I don't want to have a heart full of anger when I do that. I don't want to be, take this, kind of thing, because whatever I'm coming with sort of gets imbued, it gets imprinted with my emotional energy. There is one kind of exception to this that I think is important to note, in that sometimes we can make offerings to help us with grief. And I don't, if you are grieving, you should know that grieving is a process. It's non-linear, meaning that, people always talk about the 5 stages of grief. Well, I've moved from this to this, and now I'm, never going back to that. No, it's not the way it happens. I can think of people that I've lost, for example, and still have experience of disreality. So a little bit of denial there. Oh, yeah, that friend passed away last year, and I can still feel some depression about that. So these things can be somewhat cyclical. Grief does get better over time if you treat it, if you respect yourself, if you give yourself space and love. You can make offerings in a time of grief, and I think that's totally fine and appropriate, and the spirits will understand that. And the way I might make an offering, if, let's say I lost a friend, a friend passed away, I might make an offering and say, I am grieving, and I know this is part of my process. I'm not asking you to take my grief away, because that would be artificial and not really great. But can you please, help my friend on his journey to make sure that he is okay and well taken care of? And anything you can do to smooth over that, the grief that I'm feeling would be helpful. And that can help you I think that can help in a very real way on a spiritual level, but on a psychological level, because it feels like you are honoring your loved one that you're grieving. It feels like you may be honoring, your feelings, and that's really important with grief. Too many people try to push through grief. Well, I've grieved for this period of time, so my grieving period is done. It just doesn't work that way. It never has worked that way. It will never work that way. That is counter to the way human beings work. So I think it's perfectly fine, even if you are in deep grief, to make an offering, even if you feel like, oh, this isn't the right emotional state to make an offering. Just do it. Just do it with the right intention at that point, right? The intention is, I am grieving. I want to go through this grieving process in a way that, not necessarily less painful. You don't necessarily want to have them take away your pain. The grief process is all of it is important, but I want to transition smoothly through this grief process, and I want my friend who I've lost to be, taken care of and looked in upon, and to understand that I love and miss them. And I think that act in and of itself will help you through the grief process. It has helped me in times when I have been grieving things. And you can grieve more than people. You can grieve the loss of a relationship. You can grieve the loss of a job. It may not be as impactful as the loss of a loved one, but there's still a little bit of a grief process that you go through when those things end. So, some other, the main reason to make offering, is definitely to create better relationship with spirit. That's primarily it. You can do it as part of an ask for, specific favors. If you're asking specific favors of spirit, please heal me, please, help me find a new job, please, any of those things. I think offerings are appropriate at that time, because again, it's you're asking something. There's an exchange, and I promised I was going to talk about exchange, and I'm coming to that. So there's a little bit of an exchange, but it's not. I don't think it's great to think of most relationships, as completely transactional. In that, spirits are not, even though we have these legends of the genies as wish-granting machines, they don't exactly work that way. They still work within sort of prescribed bounds, and, may want to help you or may not, or, what have you. But, making an offering is appropriate, and you can't make it from the perspective of, I'm giving you this, you must do this for me. You have to go with some humility and, please help me with this. I am trying to find a new job. I would appreciate any help that you can give me. I think that's appropriate. Not, I want a $125,000 a year job, and I want it offered to me on Tuesday, and I want to be put in charge of, put in charge of this division, and I want this person fired, and blah, blah, blah. And that being said, there are, I am aware of traditions where that is a fairly normal practice. I in no way want to get into any arguments with people who do that sort of thing. I'm aware of certain things, voodoo and hoodoo, for example, where, very specific petitions are made to very specific spirits. And that's fine. I don't know enough about them and I don't judge other people's systems of belief or spiritual practices. And in that case, as far as I know, there would always be very appropriate offerings, and everything would be very prescribed. How you would do it, what days you would do things on, what were the conditions, all kinds of stuff like that would have to go on. You have to do things over a certain period of time. Interestingly, I think candles, a lot of people do, candle magic, or they light candles in church as a prayer, that sort of thing. Candles are an interesting form of offering, right? Because you're actually, you're burning something away. You're transmuting something, by burning it away. You're burning the wax and the wick, and you're giving off light at the same time. You're giving off the vibration, some light vibrations, and you may pray over the candle. In some traditions, they might rub specific oils in the candle to give it a certain vibration. So, burning a candle, when done in a specific way, is an interesting and, in my opinion, perfectly valid form of offering. So I want to wrap up this podcast and talking about exchange and spiritual exchange, and talk about, and I already, told you my feeling about how spiritual professionals wanting to get paid for their work is completely fine, and has been going on forever. Every once in a while, I run into, on social media or over email or talking to people in person or what have you, I run into people who have this idea that spirituality needs to be 100% divorced from money in every way, and that it is wrong to charge people for spiritual teaching or spiritual healing or spiritual services. And that's an interesting idea, and I don't exactly know where it comes from, because this is not a tradition that I am aware of coming from anywhere. And yes, money can be problematic. Money is a patriarchal system. It was pretty much invented by armies, so they didn't have to. They could, when they were invading territories, didn't have to lug supplies with them. They could just lug coins with them, and then exchange those. So it was a method of exchange. But we get so wrapped up in money, and we've heard money is the root of all evil. The real saying is the love of money is the root of all evil. And people kill over money, and people fight over money, and families break up over money. And yeah, there is all of that. Money itself is not inherently good or bad. Money is a tool of exchange. It's basically a way for me to turn my labor into the goods that I need, that I want and need. I need to live in a house, or, I don't live in an apartment. I live in a house. I could live in an apartment, but I need to have a shelter to live in. And, I live in the modern world, and I don't have survival skills to live in a cave somewhere. So I need to purchase food, and I need electricity. And I couldn't do this podcast if I wasn't able to buy a microphone and have internet access. And trust me when I say that if I could do shamanism, do shamanism for free every single day of my life for the rest of my life, I certainly would, because I love it, and it's my path, and I love sharing this with the world. It's one of the reasons, I write and I do this podcast and everything, because I just want to share what I love with the world. And I'm happy to do that. But I need to live. And so I've spent many, many years of my life, countless hours studying, training, practicing, doing apprenticeships, going through ordeals, being initiated. I have spent, I don't know how many dollars of my time how many dollars of my money on training, travel to training, all of these things. So to expect that I would somehow be able to operate in the world without money because somehow it's bad, wrong, or evil to charge money for things just doesn't fly. And, there aren't too many spiritual traditions where going back to, however far in humanity you can look, where there wasn't compensation for spiritual professionals. So if you were the village shaman and people went to you, they would bring you stuff. They would feed you and clothe you and give you a place to live because there wasn't money. If you were, if you were running a, some sort of, temple back in the, almost anywhere, people would bring animals to you to sacrifice and survive on. They would donate time and food and labor and all of these things. So, would I potentially live, there aren't too many situations like that these days that aren't abusive as well, right? Where you have these, big communes with gurus running them who wind up abusing their people. And they're, people work day in and day out, kind of slave labor kinds of situations that exists all over these days. And unless we want spiritual teaching to just kind of die out, unfortunately, to have spiritual professionals, really the only way is to exchange something, and the method of exchange that is most common in the world is money. I have had people offer other things to exchange with me. I'm not usually in a position to accept that, and it creates these, complicated interdependencies. That being said, I do give away a tremendous amount of my knowledge, as do many of the teachers and practitioners I know. People contact me for help over email all the time. And, I spend a lot of time answering email. I write articles based on what people want that are available for free. I do this podcast. I pay for this podcast to be hosted. And so, that's one aspect. The one aspect is, if you want people to be doing this work, they have to be able to live. You don't want somebody to be financially abusive, to take advantage, and unfortunately, the situations that it would create if we're like, okay, all spiritual teaching needs to be free, are the kinds of situations where people get financially, sexually, physically, emotionally abused in a lot of times in a lot of places, where people go live in these compounds and, the guru walks around and doesn't have to think about money and all of these things. That's not me, and I never want to, I don't ever want to be in that situation. I mean, I wouldn't abuse people, but I don't want to live in an environment like that. So that's fine. So we can disagree about whether, and whether I'm getting paid or not. I don't water down anything that I'm doing or any of my teachings or any of my knowledge. I don't hold anything back. I don't, you're going to get the really secret stuff for $19.95, and, for just $10 more in shipping and handling, you can get XYZ. No, it's not like that. Okay. There are people I see out there that are doing some sketchy things, but it's not for me to go after them or comment on them or what have you. None of the people I'm associated with or have been associated with or know personally do anything along those lines. I think everybody's fairly reasonable. So the other aspect is the idea of exchange. And I can tell you this, like I taught martial arts for, I mentioned this before, for a couple of decades, over 20 years. I'm not sure how long now. I've lost track. For a really long time, I taught martial arts, and I didn't want to necessarily run a martial arts school. It's a hard thing, particularly where I live, and there aren't a lot of people here. You have to have a fairly metropolitan, somewhat city-like area to get enough people in your door, and then you have to set up all of these programs and kids and all of this stuff. And I just martial arts is something I love. I grew up with. It is my form of exercise and stress relief, and my spirituality informs it, and it informs my spirituality and all these things, right? So it's just a thing that I love and that I love to share. And I have taught for free for many years, over 10 years. I teach for free. One of the reasons I do that is that I get to pick the students that I want to teach. I actually, very carefully vet the people I want to teach. But I'll tell you what happens is that, at one point I had 15 or 16 students, and then over time that would dwindle down to like one student. And part of that is that I don't advertise commercially, and I don't, I'm not running a big commercial school with a storefront and all of these things. The other part of it is when there is no exchange, when people are giving nothing for what they're getting, they do not, this is just human nature, they do not value it. They do not place a greater value on it. I was towards, when I was training with my teacher, towards the end 20 years ago, I think I was paying like $150 a month to go train. It was a pretty expensive training class, and I would go to every single class because I had made an investment, not just in my time, but in my money and all of these things. I had made an investment of myself. I had sacrificed some of myself, so I was taking advantage of that. I have had experiences with people from time to time. I have been convinced to work with people on a sliding scale. Somebody comes to me for shamanic healing, and they're like, I really need this, but I have no money. And I've had people lie to me about that. I've had people who I have found out they were not broke and were running very successful businesses and stuff, lie about that and say, I don't have any money. And I'm like, okay, well, I really want to work with you, and I'll work with you on a sliding scale, and I'll accept half of my fee. When that happens, those people miss appointments, don't show up on time, get angry with me if I, don't allow them to reschedule a no-show. I've had clients that I have fired because they no-showed after I gave them, a huge break on my fees. And, these people are not, unfortunately, in my experience, are not taking this seriously. Now, it is something I will continue to do probably. If somebody is really hard up and they seem absolutely serious, and I would have to have a conversation with them first. I think all people deserve healing and all people deserve service. But that exchange is really important. That energy exchange is really important. And I can't, I and other practitioners can't just continually give of ourselves with getting nothing back, and it's not that I don't get nothing from sharing, from sharing and teaching and healing and all of those things. I do. Like, I get a tremendous amount of satisfaction out of it, but it is very draining. I'm exhausted when I'm done with a session with a client. And to get nothing back to sustain me, to sustain my life, would just be very off balance. So you may disagree with me. You may have this strange idea out there that all spiritual workers should be impoverished and charge nothing for their work and live in a hut somewhere. I can tell you that you can't even live in a hut around here for nothing, because when they find people living on public land or on other people's property in makeshift huts around here, which happens more often than you might think, they actually get arrested and evicted. So that's not even it's not even in the realm of reality. It's so out of touch with reality. So anyway, I realize I got a bit personal here and I've gone way over time. But I did want to talk about offerings. I wanted to talk about exchange. I did want to talk about all the things that I've talked about today and why it's important. So with that, I will leave you. I love you all. I hope you stay safe and sane and happy and healthy. And I will talk to you next time.
You have been listening to Speaking Spirit with your host, John Moore. For more info or to contact John, go to mainshaman.com. That's maineshaman.com.